Well, hello everyone again. This is Anthony Mullins, and this is a training webinar for the GCI Ministry Coaching program that we're calling Turning Words into Actions. And I so appreciate your involvement today. Again, if you have any questions as we go along, don't hesitate to unmute your microphone or throw your questions and commentary in the chat room. And the chat room is available on the right-hand side at the lower right-hand column. You'll see the three dots. You can open that up, or even better, there is a chat tool at the bottom on your toolbar. If you'll scroll over the various tools there, one of them says chat, and you can just throw a comment in there. So let's go ahead and get started. And today I wanted to kind of frame our coaching conversation around three quotes that will give us some guidance as we have this discussion about turning words into actions. Benjamin Franklin said, "Never confuse motion with action." And this is such a good way to start the conversation, because when we talk about turning words into actions, the last thing we want to do is get people so busy that they're doing things that don't really matter. And certainly we would define things that matter as really being for other people and bringing meaning and purpose to their lives. And so it's very seductive to, in our desire in our coaching conversations, to get people activated, which is important. We'll talk more about that. But we want to make sure that they're doing actions that fit the need, that fit the leadership of the Spirit for their context, and actions that truly do matter. And Andy Stanley kind of backs that statement up by saying, devoting a little of yourself to everything means committing a great deal of yourself to nothing. And everybody on here on this call is a pastor. And so you know what it looks like to get caught up in the minutia of church business, and maybe because you're the one employed person or you're the point person, it's very easy to end up raising your hand to a lot of things and committing yourself and truly overcommitting yourself, which in my own life, I've been there, done that, and I find that I'm very ineffective at most everything when I'm spread too thin. And so I think a big part of coaching relationship and being an effective coach is helping the people that you're coaching develop actions that actually play to their strengths. It's very easy in a coaching environment to kind of focus on the deficits or the weaknesses or the gaps and focus all your energy there. But I'm finding more and more it's far more productive to help people turn words into actions in areas they already have some measure of strength. Here's an example of this, and I shared this yesterday with the coaches, and I know Becky and Carrie were on the call, coaches that are dealing with our GCI interns. Just a quick example. Andy Rooney is one of our interns, and early on it was quite clear he was reticent about fundraising. And that's part of the program. They have to raise money to help support themselves. And it's for multiple reasons. It's a practical reason, to help cover part of their salary. But the second reason, and maybe this is even more important, their faith is fed when they actually send out donor letters and talk to people, and people actually give. I mean, it's so encouraging, and it feeds your faith when people are saying, yeah, I see what the Lord is up to in your life, and I want to support that financially through generosity. That really matters. And I remember Andy telling me as he thought about fundraising, he was thinking about his context, all the people he knew. They didn't come from places of means. They didn't have a lot of financial resources. And he was early on in any sort of ministry environment. So he felt like he didn't have a story to tell, really. I haven't accomplished anything, so who would want to give to what I'm trying to do? Well, as he invested himself in ministry and he got to know people in the community, and he actually started asking people to participate in his ministry through financial giving, and people started to give, he realized he's quite an effective fundraiser, and he is. And so a couple of coaching sessions ago, and he wouldn't mind me telling this, we were talking about fundraising, and he's been tasked of raising $9,000 this upcoming year. Because he is so effective as a fundraiser, I asked him to up the ante. And I said, well, what if instead of $9,000, you commit to raising $18,000 in this upcoming year as a pay it forward kind of scenario where you're all in this program, and you can help somebody else enter into the program and give them a great launching point because you've covered their fundraising goal for that particular year, or however it gets dispersed. But just the concept of it, and he just knowing Andy, knowing what his strengths are, not only that he's a good fundraiser, but there's a competitive streak in him that he wants to rise to the occasion and exceed it if he can. He was all about doing that, and he recently sent out a thank you letter and a donor update, and he spent one of his last paragraphs just talking about this. He's so all into the GCI, the people, the program, what he's receiving from it. He wants to pay it forward, and I have no doubt it's going to happen. So I think a big part of it is not just activating energy toward just motion, but also playing to their strengths and really bringing out the best in them. And that might mean challenging them a bit to focus their energies in areas where they're already doing really, really well. The final one, I've always loved this proverb: the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And what I hear out of this, for some of the people that we will coach, and you know this, not everybody's a self-starter. Some people really struggle to get activated. And so the best thing you can do to help them as a coach is really help them take the first step toward an action that gets them closer to their goal and what the Lord is leading them to. There's a principle in chemistry and having a chemical reaction that's called activation energy. And the law basically states that the vast majority of energy is required on the front end of a chemical reaction just to get it launched. But once it starts, then the energy needs are reduced because kind of momentum takes over. And I find that very similar in a way in coaching people, especially those who aren't self-starters, that the hardest part is just taking the first step of action. And so activating them is going to be really key, helping them to agree to action steps that are meaningful for them, but also holding them in loving account, which we'll talk more about, if they're struggling to take this first step. And we know this, there is one who stands opposed to them taking that first step, and they will feel opposed. And sometimes it's their own doubt in their mind, but helping them overcome that. Because what happens once they take that first step and second step, sort of like Andy with fundraising, once he kind of changed his mind about it and got past those first couple of steps, now he's up and running. And now I just kind of encourage him to take him a little bit further. So I think these kind of help frame our discussion today. So this particular slide, it says simple math. 5 frogs are sitting on a log, okay? That's pretty simple. Not the Budweiser frogs, but just 5 frogs. And then 4 of the frogs decide to jump off. How many frogs are left? You may want to throw an answer in the chat room, but if you're like me, it seems like the most logical response is, well, 1 frog is left. Well, we would be wrong because the answer is 5 frogs. 5 frogs are left because, listen to the question. They decide to jump off. And if we go to the next slide, this tells the tale, especially in coaching. Deciding to do something and actually doing it are 2 very different things. Deciding is important. Getting an agreement is really important. It's an important step. But actually doing it's a whole nother matter. And that's why effective coaching really truly requires us to follow up on what was agreed upon to do, to make sure that we can encourage and celebrate, to reassess, or maybe even to challenge when things aren't being done. So getting people to the step at the end of a coaching call where they've agreed to certain actions is great, but using the first third of the next conversation to assess what was agreed upon, what happened in between the coaching calls, celebrating the victories, but also challenge them, especially if they didn't follow through on what they agreed to do, is vital in having healthy coaching relationships. So here are some practical steps that I have discovered, learned, failed at, tried along the way that might be helpful for us to really internalize, write down whatever you've got to do to help people to turn those words or agreed upon actions into true actions. Number one, help them stop waiting until conditions are perfect. I mean, this sounds so obvious and logical, doesn't it? I can recall working with a pastor once who talked about, well, we're having a conversation about engaging the community and um, really reaching outside of ourselves, outside the walls of the church, to meet people in our context right around our church. But his concern was until we were truly relational and loving and welcoming to each other, a real family in the house, there's no way that we were going to go outside the house to connect with our community. And I think you know where I'm going with this. Those conditions will never be perfect where inside your church, because we're dealing with imperfect people, broken people, relationships break down. It will never be truly relational. And there's the dual dynamic of, as you go out and serve others, it does something to the family environment inside the house. And so it's not a one or the other. It's not a either or, it's a both and I know you understand this, but oftentimes when we're dealing with new pastors, interns, planters, sometimes we are saddled and strapped by our own belief about things having to be just ideal before we take the step. But the steps are never ideal. And as a coach, you're doing a service to the people that you're coaching if you help them kind of get beyond that. And I see somebody drop something in chat. Ted says, it's a concept I've found helpful in the old adage. It's easier to steer a moving vehicle. Man, that is so true. If I had time, I'd tell you the time I was riding a four-wheeler and froze as I was coming around a corner and saw a tree. And I didn't give it gas like I should have turned. So I ended up, yeah, it was bad. So that's so true. You have to steer a moving vehicle. Thank you, Ted, for that. I'm going to write that one down. That's good. Secondly, stop overthinking things. And I think this is powerful in our context because I have found in GCI we have cognitive learners. We really love to think deeply about things, and that's a great strength. But where it can become a weakness, and of course there's always weakness seeds in these strengths, is we tend to have analysis paralysis where we'll overthink or want to overlearn and again try to get to that ideal condition before we will act. And that's not healthy either. And, we talk often about the elusive balance, and who knows where balance is, but I just know I've just seen it enough in our own context that we tend to overthink things. And really we're doing a service to these coachees if we help them just take some action. And often the things that we're fearing, as you know, don't ever come about. So instead of stewing without doing, do, and then figure some things out, reassess, and then adjust as needed. Thirdly, and this is really huge, because this is what coaching is built on, you must take continuous action. You must help those you're coaching. Every call, every coaching session must lead to some sort of action. Again, we want action that fits, action that's meaningful, but there needs to be continuous motion moving forward, or else it's not truly coaching. So just getting the people that you're working with in the mindset of, okay, what's next? What do I need to do next? That flows out of who I am and what the Lord has called me to is really powerful. This is a big one. Using action to overcome fear. Now, this may seem counterintuitive, but it's actually naming, facing the fear, and doing something about it that helps you to overcome it. Here's an example that we've all probably faced ourselves, and that is the fear of speaking. The great fear that's out there for most people. You guys have done it for a long time now, so you probably have overcome this fear. But what I have found with people that really struggle with fear of speaking, it's not the speaking themselves that generates the fear. It's the time leading up until they actually do it. And if you're an overthinker, which often our people are, it's that time that you have thinking about doing the action that really can be crippling. So it's helping people just go ahead and raise their hand, name their fear, take some action toward it that actually helps them overcome it. And that's your role as a coach, to help them lovingly, encouragingly, but also challengingly take steps to face and meet that fear. Finally, this is a big one, eliminating and minimizing the distractions along the way. And this is where it's really helpful to know the people that you're working with. If I'm just a personal example, if I'm facing a big project I really don't want to do, first of all, it's really helpful as a coach to just have this in your mindset all the time. Do the tough things first. Do the hard things first, and help your coachees get there too. But I just know me, if there's a project I'm facing, I don't really want to do it. Man, suddenly I love cleaning the house, raking the leaves, or doing anything that will distract me, watching a rerun of a Kentucky basketball game. It doesn't matter. Suddenly, all those things look great to me because I don't want to do that thing. So whatever you can do as a coach to help people eliminate whatever their distractions are, and you can find out these distractions by asking several simple questions. First of all, if I come to a place in a coaching call where we've had some agreed upon actions, I'll ask the question, what will hinder you from doing this? What is a distraction that may keep you from following through on this? And just listen to them talk. That's part of accountability, is just naming what might get in the way from taking those steps. So that's where you as a coach really help the person you're coaching by asking good questions. I'll just go ahead and stop for a moment. Are there any questions, any thoughts that you want to bring up here at this point, either in the chat room or unmuting your mic? I'll just give some space for that to happen. Continuous action, long obedience in the same direction, from Eugene Peterson. Hoping does not mean doing nothing. It is not fatalistic resignation. It means going about our assigned tasks, confident that God will provide the meaning and the conclusions. It is not compelled to work away at keeping up appearances with a bogus spirituality. It is the opposite of desperate and panicky manipulations of scurrying and worrying. I tell you what, thank you, Ted, for posting that. And I'm a Twitter user. I use it as my news source, and I follow people that I have like interests with. And Eugene Peterson is one of them. And if you follow Eugene Peterson on Twitter, he is adamant about how pastors, especially in the West, are just so busy keeping up with appearances and really not focusing on their own spiritual development, formation. And he just has a lot of powerful things to say in that regard. So, I'm with you, Ted. Thanks for posting that. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on. Here is a simple strategy that you can use, and I find it's effective on the first third of any coaching session you have. It's called the WIN strategy. And this will help you turn words into actions, but actions that matter to the person you're coaching. Here's what we have to come to grips with. We might agree upon something as being important in one coaching session, but depending on the coaching frequency of your calls, maybe there's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month in between, things change. And you have to acknowledge that things have changed in the life of the person that you're coaching. And even though there may be agreed upon long-term strategy or long-term destination, getting there, things just change in people's lives. So it's always important to ask, however you ask it, the way that you frame it, in the beginning of a coaching conversation, what's important now? I know we talked a month ago or 2 weeks ago, and we decided that was important. Well, what's important now based on what's happened in between our sessions? Again, however you want to frame that, it frees up the person that you're coaching to acknowledge that things have changed, because we just know how life is and how ministry, the winds of our sales of ministry have changed at times. And if we make assumptions about what's important in this particular phone conversation or video conference without acknowledging what has happened in between, we can make big time assumptions that lead us to direct certain actions that really don't fit anymore, or don't fit in the moment or the season that's that's upon us. So as a coach, because it's based on the art of questioning, it tries to eliminate assumptions, but still we're human and we tend to do it. So this win strategy helps you not to make assumptions about what's important right now. And this is a way to build up trust with your coachee by just asking them, okay, what's going on right now? What matters to you at this moment? Okay. So I would certainly put this in your tool bag. Now I showed this to the folks that were on the call yesterday, but it's great review for them and powerful for us who are thinking through what might bring the coaching relationship off the rails or not lead us to appropriate actions. Because coaching is all about forward momentum. You see the guy here; he's on the side of the road, broke down, he ain't moving, and that's not a good place to be in a coaching relationship. So, what are some things that might break it down? The number one coaching breakdown, in my estimation, is a lack of clarity of where you're going. And I know for those of you who have coached or who have, you've been pastors for a long time, you've done vision plans, you've written mission statements. Should seem very basic and extremely logical. But I'm constantly surprised when I jump on a coaching call to audit, to listen to others, how frequently I don't hear any sort of clarity around where that conversation is going. And then that, of course, that's where all the cliches come in. If you don't have a plan and don't work the plan, you plan to end up, wherever. And that I see that happening. And so there's a two-prong approach here. There needs to be a clarity around where the ultimate goal is, where this coaching relationship is leading. And that needs to take place on the front end when the coaching relationship begins. You need to have clarity around and an agreement upon what the end game is for the coaching relationship. And once you have that target that you're working toward, then you need to have clarity around each coaching session. Now, the main target, that long-term destination, should inform every single coaching call. And that should work itself into every single coaching session to bring some informative clarity around what you should be doing in each call. But it's very important each time you get into a coaching session to decide and agree upon where we're going for the next 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour that we have together. And it simply can happen by this. Asking the question, what do you want to talk about today? And listening to that, and then reframing that. Well, I heard you say you want to talk about this and this. Is that correct? And by the way, that's where to ask closed-ended questions, because closed-ended questions, just getting a simple yes or no, brings clarity and agreement. So there is a time to ask those closed-ended questions. Then you might ask, well, in your own words, what would make this call successful? What do you want to accomplish? And once you hear that, repeat it back for clarity. And so if I heard you correctly, if we do this and this is going to be a great coaching call. They say yes, then you're on your way. You have clarity for that call, clarity that will bring you to action steps, what will lead you closer to that already predetermined destination. And of course, you may have to adjust that destination as you go, and that's fine. But having clarity for each coaching call is vital. And even though this is basic one-on-one stuff, I know for most of us, I'm still surprised at how infrequently I'll hear clarity on a coaching call. So whatever you have to do to bring about that clarity, it's really important to help people moving forward. And this next slide just reinforces that. Clear start, clear finish. But keep in mind the need to re-clarify that, to clarify and re-clarify all the time. And you do that through the art of questioning. Don't make assumptions in this regard. And of course, in our scenario in GCI, it may not be just what the coachee wants to do. There may be a supervisor that they have who has predetermined what that outcome should be. So if it's working with interns, it's working with a church planter, it's working with a pastor. In every scenario, there's also someone else who has had say in what the plan should be or what the outcome should be. And so that has to be worked into this. So you give freedom to the coachee to talk about what it is within that framework they want to work on, but you always have to keep in mind what the plan is. And that's why it's so important as a coach to communicate with whoever the supervisor of that person is and anyone else who might be really needing to be involved in the process. And it's always good stewardship and wise. It builds trust to ask the coachee if you can share certain pieces of information with those other people that are involved so they can stay in the loop too. The second breakdown that I see, and again, this is relationship 101, but you may miss it sometimes in a coaching relationship where this shows up, and of course that's a lack of trust, because you won't really get to meaningful action steps and get the follow through that you need as a coach, or really that the coachee needs for their purposes, unless there's trust that is built. And I have found in my own coaching relationships, or just relationships in general, I can identify when there's a lack of trust when they won't get to the core issues. In other words, they present something and it's sort of skimming along the surface, and you don't really get to the issue that matters. And you saw this next slide at the coach clinic back in April, May, early May in Ohio. But it's when the coachee will give you something they say is what they need to really work on, but it's just a symptom of the real core issue that you need to get to. And that's what I mean. If there's no trust, you don't ever get to that core issue. And so do your due diligence as a coach, especially on the front end of the relationship. And we don't, I mean, you guys know what you're doing. You're shepherds, you're caretakers of people. You work with people all the time, so you know what this looks like. But you need to do the work in a coaching relationship to make sure you have the trust that you get to real issues. I was coaching someone recently, and they were talking about the issue at hand. And I asked them that there were two approaches. One would be a counseling approach, and one would be a coaching approach based on helping them kind of face the fear that they were having. And I was really pleased. They knew we could go into counseling mode, but ultimately we wanted to deal with the issue by developing some actions that would get them to the real core, because this person I was coaching, and I don't want to go into specifics, but they were brutally honest about what it was they were struggling with and what they wanted to be coached on. And I knew even in that moment we had trust, because there's no way that coachee would have allowed me to go there in that space in their heart and their soul unless there was trust. And so this is something you're going to have to be in tune with the Spirit, really listening to what your coachee is saying, and identify, are they just skimming the surface, or do we have the kind of trust that will let us get to coaching that will lead to really truly meaningful steps. Now, here is something I think might be specific to our denominational context, that I wanted to bring up, that I shared with some of you yesterday, but I think it's so important that we are aware of this in our own coaching. And that is, the coaching relationships can break down if we're wearing the wrong hat too often. And the right hat, and because I'm facilitating this conversation, I get to choose which is the right hat. And of course, that's the Kentucky Wildcat hat. That's the only right hat. But what I'm talking about, and we did talk about this at the coach clinic, but this is something we have to be on guard on in our coaching relationships, is, are we in coach mode? Are we wearing that hat? Or are we wearing our mentor hat? Are we wearing our consultant hat? Or are we wearing the counselor hat? Now, because you're in coaching relationships, you must be in coach mode as much as possible, or else you may be doing a disservice to what the intent of the relationship is. And just for a quick reminder and a quick overview, coaching is drawing out the best of the coachee, asking artful questions that lead them to steps that draw them closer to the agreed upon destination. But you're doing that through questioning. They are providing the answers. You are supplying, kind of leading them there through questions. Mentor is where somebody who is more experienced is pouring into the person that they're working with. They're sharing their experience, their know-how, the lessons they have learned. Whereas consultant assesses, they listen and assess, and then they make recommendations on what they think the person will do. Now, in our context in GCI, and I listen, folks, I mean no disrespect by this at all. I'm just trying to state what is, because our coaches are often experienced pastors. It's easy for us to slip into consultant mode and not even know it, and just really try to tell the person what they should do. Now, there's a time for that. I coach 4 of our interns. They're in a season of life where there's a lot of things they don't know, they haven't experienced, and so there is a time to kind of help assess a situation and give them some recommendation. But listen to me, coaches, as you do this, you need to be aware of it and even ask the person that you're coaching, can I take off my coach hat for a moment and put on my consultant hat? I do this quite a bit. It signals that the conversation is going to change for a moment, but it also reminds you that you need to get back into coach mode as quickly as possible. Now, here's a big reason why I want us to, in coaching relationships, try to avoid going in consultant mode too much, is because that brings you back into making assumptions. Because of our own experience and things that worked or didn't work, we tried and it failed. You may say that to especially our younger emerging leaders, and that might not be the case for them. Maybe what worked for you or didn't work for you in the past is not the best consultation for them in this moment because their context is different. Maybe the Spirit is up to a different thing in their life. So you have to be very careful about trying to be overly directive in where you're steering the conversation. So I bring this up and I kind of park the conversation there for a moment just because I see that's where we can slide into most frequently, is either the mentor or, more importantly, consultant mode. There is time to go into counselor mode. And we all know the benefit of counseling, pastoral counseling, and helping people work through some of the challenges that they have. And so you just need to be aware of when you're going into that mode. And here's the thing I would encourage you to do is not to stay there. Like I have one person I'm coaching. If I allowed it to, they'd want to stay in counselor mode as much as possible. And there's a place for that. And I don't fight it too much, but I always look for the opportunity to jump into coach mode. And here's why I say that. In most coaching relationships, people are coming to you as a certified coach. And I'm talking outside of GCI. They're coming to you as a certified coach, and they're even paying you to help them. Okay. So they're wanting coaching. They know they need coaching. And so they come to the table ready to be coached. In our context, everybody or most everybody that we're coaching, it's been mandated of them. So whether they want to or not, they're being coached. So in some ways, you have to allow for a little more freedom to kind of, especially, I go back to our interns for a moment. They're young and there's still things that they're working through. And so you may have to go into counselor mode for a while. You may have to go into mentor mode for a while. That's okay. What I'm encouraging to do as a coach is to get into coach mode as soon as you can and stay there as long as you can in these relationships. Because it's really easy for us, just based on who we are, to want to just kind of stay in some of these other modes because it's easier for us. So my encouragement is to go and stay into coach mode. Any questions, thoughts, challenges, disagreements on anything that was just said over the last 3 or 4 slides? And by the way, I'm glad I had you muted on the Kentucky cap. I don't need any feedback on that. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, here are some things, once you get to some action steps, I think some of these tools are helpful in terms of managing the process as you go. And it'd be healthy probably to have some dialogue about this as we go through it or after we go through it. Number one, and I've mentioned this already a couple of times, agree to actions that fit. Frankly, from where I sit, I'd rather almost there be inaction and just really good conversation than trying to get them to do actions that don't really matter for what it is that is going on in their life and their participation in ministry in their context. So we just need to make sure that they are actions that fit and actions that can truly be done. And this is where your intuition, leadership of the Holy Spirit is so vital. You want to agree upon actions that don't overstretch them too far where they can't accomplish it, but you don't want to agree to actions that don't really move the conversation forward either. And this is is something that we get better and better at as we do it. But we want to make sure we agree to actions that truly do fit the situation. Revisit prior action plans. And this is going to require work on your behalf as a coach to make sure that you've documented and you're aware and you revisit what was agreed upon in the last coaching session. And of course, that's where you spend the first, third of your phone call, just getting back into relationship, catching up on how they're doing, where they've been, what they've been involved in, celebrating. Obviously, celebrate the things that they have accomplished since the last time. Talk and reassess the things that didn't work so well. But you have to revisit it, or else these action plans are just poof, they're vapor. And you miss opportunities to truly help them, not only in the moment, but long term. When there's loving accountability in these action plans, that serves them so well to develop the internal self-discipline to do what's needed um, based on whether the Lord is leading them. Acknowledge change since the last conversation. And again, this goes back to the win strategy. You can't assume that things have not developed since the last time. So it's not just revisiting the action plans, but also listening for words, conversations, statements that lead you to believe that things maybe have a change since the last time you talked. Acknowledging that and then readjusting the plan as you go. Assess what happens in between coaching conversations. Okay? This may sound like we're saying the same thing over again, but we're not. When I say assessing what's happening in between the conversation, find out, okay, if there's an action plan in place, how does this person go about tackling the plan? If they're waiting to the last minute to do it and it's being done haphazardly, you need to assess that and help them. And a big part of it is just acknowledging it and saying it out loud. I've noticed this pattern of waiting to the last minute. Let's rethink this. So you have to understand what's going on in between the coaching conversations. Help the coachee stay focused between the conversations. This is something where I don't want to press in too much on this where it becomes a codependent relationship, but you can do your coachee a great service in between the coaching calls just by checking in. If they've agreed to do something, and here's something I always do. I know not every coach does it, but if they've agreed to do something, I ask them when they're going to accomplish it. I like them to tell me a date or a day. And the reason I do it is just something about, I know it works for me. If I've committed myself to doing something by a certain day, I'll do it. But if I don't agree to a day, I'll wait. It's just the way I'm wired. And I know in the human experience, I'm not the only one like that. So if you touch base with them in between the coaching call, or if they agree to do it at a certain day in between your calls, just check in. Hey, how did it go? And that's a way to kind of keep them on track, or simply and authentically let them know, I'm praying. I know you've got this big action step coming up next Thursday, and I just want you to know I'm in prayer with you. Whatever, just touch base in between the coaching calls will do wonders in helping them accomplish what they set out to accomplish. Keep the coachee focused on the big picture and the current context at the same time. So in every coaching call, there should be some sort of reference to the big picture, whatever has been agreed upon, whatever their stated goal has been. And you refer to that. And again, as I said before, that informs how you go about each and every coaching conversation to help them get to that big target that they have out there. Every coaching conversation should be several steps forward to whatever that big picture is. Promote the coachee self-discipline and accountability. Again, like I said before, we're not looking for codependency on the coach, because that's not true coaching. But you want to push it back on them as much as possible, and not on them alone, but have them think about the resources at their disposal wherever they're located, the mentors that are in their sphere already, people that they trust and believe in that can help them stay in loving account to what they've agreed to do. That only helps, and that also promotes kind of a team effort. Even though you're the primary coach, that helps you utilize the people, the pastors, the supervisors, the mentors already in their life, and it helps them to hold themselves accountable by doing that, because that means they take the accountability structure or the things that you've agreed upon, and they're asking others to hold them in account. That's healthy and that's good. Develop the coachee's ability to make decisions and learn from the circumstance. Again, you don't want them to lean on you to come up with all the action plans. You're asking them to develop their own action plans. And then this is such a big deal, is helping them exegete the situation and the circumstance to learn from their successes, and even label it whatever you want: failure, hiccups, gaps in following through, whatever, in whatever your language is, to help them see that they can learn from this, and you still believe that they're capable, but you want to find out why are they not following through. And there may be times that you really have to challenge the coachee. I'll give you an example. I was one of our young ministers asked me to coach him, and it was in the second conversation I realized he didn't really want to be coached. And once I realized that there was no need to go any further, so I just and I did this hopefully with great respect and love. I said, listen, let's be honest about it. I don't think you really want to be coached, and that's okay, but we need to name it so that you're not frustrated when I'm trying to get you to action steps, and I'm not frustrated as your coach. So it sounds like to me, based on everything I'm hearing, you just want somebody to open up and talk to. And I said, that's fine. I'm happy to do that. I love to listen. I love being a part of your life, but I'm not going to go into coach mode and frustrate either one of us. Is that fair? And so sometimes you kind of have to make those conversations. Now, in his case, here's the difference. In his case, he was volunteering to be coached. He just didn't really know what he wanted. He didn't want to be coached. In the case of many of the people that come to us, they're being mandated. And so it has to be more nuanced, and you kind of just walk them through it and talk them through it. Again, look for opportunities to coach. But this is where you're going to have to, be aware of where the conversation is going. And if we need to have conversations, if I can help in any way, or if a conversation with their supervisor, that's fine too. This is where we're going to have to trust each other that we will call it out as it needs to be called out. Again, I know everybody on this call, you love people and you're going to respect them and honor them as you do it, but it's helpful to hold them in account. Always celebrate the progress. I can't emphasize this enough. We need to have a culture of celebration, and then on the back end of that, positively confront coachee when the fact that he or she did not take agreed upon action. Listen, you're not doing them a service, a healthy service, by just continually letting that slide or coming up with excuses. And here's, there are times where there's reasons. I sometimes have legitimate reasons for not getting things done. You understand that, but when it's a consistent behavior, it's not a reason. It's just an excuse. And that's where, as a coach, you've got to be willing to say it and just name it, and then help them reassess it and decide where to go from there. Okay. Any thoughts, questions, ahas, oh no's, things you want to challenge me on? Just any feedback that you have. And I will feel free to unmute your mic if you have any thoughts on this. Now, here's the challenge of a webinar. Nobody's unmuted their mic, and I'm hoping I'm not talking to empty space, because that would really, really not be great. All right. Good. Thank you. Perfect. Somebody popped it in. Okay. Here's the final thing. I'll say it, and I'll just keep saying it. Whatever model you choose, I taught the coach model at the coach clinic we had in Ohio. But use a model. The model doesn't teach you how to coach, but it does keep you on the rails of a coaching relationship. So if you're doing this each and every coaching session, if you're connecting, coming to an agreement about an outcome for that call, an awareness of the situation, charting a course, and then going back, what did we agree upon? What did you learn? Those types of things. If you follow that path pathway each and every coaching session, you're going to come up with meaningful actions for that coachee. So stick to whatever model you've chosen. Okay, that's it for the content. I just wanted to wrap up with just some dialogue about any questions that you have, any thoughts, anything that you can add to the conversation. Maybe a way to do this is if you have learned some practical steps, some tools along the way that help move people to meaningful action, this would be a great time to go ahead. And I'm just going to go ahead and unmute everybody's mic so that we can have a chance to just have some dialogue before we wrap up our call here today. What are your thoughts? Have any of you been challenged by people that you've been coaching that it's been hard to get them to follow through with actions? Any anecdotes or just challenges you faced in that area?
This is David.
Hi,
I
David.
have found that especially when working with bivocational pastors, there's just so much on their plate that it's hard to get realistic goals that don't seem like, well, that's also little, and yet they have so much going on in their lives, especially if they're younger and have families, that it's hard to be able to plot that out, to give them an action step that pushes them and that they can actually find time to achieve. I guess that's probably one of the bigger struggles that I've been facing.
Yeah, that's a good word. I don't currently coach any bivocational pastors, but being pastored by a bivocational pastor, I know what that looks like on the grounds. Any words from the rest of you and what David's facing?
My my experience with coaching bivocational pastors is it's hard just to get a session in.
Okay,
So I
so
should
let's
feel
talk
good that
about
that's not a problem.
that. Let's talk about that for a moment, Becky. How do you schedule your sessions? How far in advance? What does that look like for you, and the frequency of the meetings?
It depends on which one of them it is. Like with an intern, we know it's going to be every 3, or if that one doesn't work, every 4 weeks on a certain day of the week at a certain time. I've got somebody else that 9:30, second Tuesday of the month, you know. But with bivocational, especially someone like Mary, her schedule is so flexible because she does a lot of contract work that it's very challenging. It's because her schedule isn't the same one week to the next. And so we just have to set it up for what works with her schedule with that next one. And
Yeah.
it could be any day of the week, could be any time. And it also something could come up where she gets a job and can't make it. So we have to reschedule.
Yeah, I can appreciate the challenges that you have there, Becky. It's my own personal experience, and this is not only coaching; it's working with pastoral teams or teams in general. Um, when you have a mindset of we're just going to meet as infrequently as needed, it's not nearly enough. Things break down, and that would probably be one more thing that I would say would be a coaching breakdown, that you only have discussions as infrequently as you're available. So, and I know you got to work around what you're dealing with, Becky. I'm not
Yeah.
pressing in. I'm just saying, as a coach, this is where you really have to hold people's feet to the fire and schedule with enough frequency that you get to meaningful action. Else, I, I I have a hard time believing it's going to be very effective. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
David, I'm not sure what the answer is, and I don't think you were necessarily looking for an answer. Um, it's only by the leadership of the Spirit that you come to some sort of balance there. And I know I'm just grateful that you've lived in that world, so you know how challenging it is. but you strike me as a person that's still going to try to challenge them as you can. Is that fair?
Yes, that's fair.
Anthony, I find in dealing with one particular individual, the idea of that person coming up with ideas, it's like pulling teeth.
Mm-hmm. Ideas for
actions, ideas for planning, anything.
Yeah, again, and there's no need to talk about specifics, but in some of our cases, again, because coaching is mandated and they didn't come to you out of a desire to be coached, you may have to be a bit more directive. I would encourage you, Dave, not to fall into the trap of just going into directive all the time, and continue to work as hard as you can to bring about some of their ideas. Um, has anybody else faced that challenge? That's one I haven't come up against really so far. Any advice, guidance that you can provide Dave in his scenario?
I know when we come up with something where we need to come up with ideas of how to accomplish something, I have what I call brainstorming mode. And so I'll say, let's go into brainstorming mode, and I want you to throw out every single thing that comes to mind about this. And I'll actually start it off, and I'll typically throw out something that's just completely ridiculous and off the wall. But then he can say, oh, no, that's way out there, but this is more logical, or this would be easier, or this would be, and it gets him going to be, or it gets them going so that they can go ahead and come up with ideas on their own.
Yeah, that's great, Dave. And I will add to that. I think this is really what you're alluding to. I have with my coaches, David Gilbert, made provocative statements that's probably too far out there for them to accomplish. And what that does, as David was alluding to, it allows them to come back to something that fits them, and it generates thought process that way. And you don't want to overuse that, but there is times to really challenge them with a provocative statement, or a provocative challenge. Then you'll settle on something that's really good and meaningful and fits for them.
That's helpful.
Any last minute thoughts, encouragements, celebrations? Well, here's what I'd like for you to do. Thank you again for participating today. I want to do these as frequently as we can if they're providing value to your coaching. So here's what I'd like for you to do in the group chat area. If you would just take a moment and tell me what was the most meaningful statement or idea, kind of just anything as far as feedback or things that you would like to see talked about in upcoming sessions. So if you would drop that in the chat area, that'd be really helpful feedback for me. Or if you want to just say it out loud, that's fine too, whatever works for you. But if everybody would participate in that, that's going to be helpful feedback for me, okay? And I'm just going to leave the views open so you can work in the chat area, or you can continue to say out loud what it is that was most meaningful for you, maybe challenge you, or what you'd like to see us talk about in future training webinars. That would be really, really helpful. So thanks everybody for your participation. I hope it was worthwhile, and happy Thanksgiving to all of you. Thank you so much.